Hi, Cami.
Hi, Pat. How are you?
I'm great. It feels like, you and I have been just chit-chatting a little bit off and on, and we started our first class, on Wednesday night and have another one tomorrow. But it's like you and I have been just doing way different things, right? We've been on different ends of the world almost and doing different things. And so it's really exciting to get back on track and start sharing again on this Confident Grief Coach show.
Yeah, it's good to get into a routine of things, and like you mentioned, classes have started up, and that always just like makes me so excited just to see people out there wanting to do this work. And then of course these conversations that we have are fun too, and just to get caught up on all the grief work that we're doing in the world warms my heart.
I know, I know. And I just got back from Portugal. So I was sharing with you, I have brought back the one thing I brought back from Portugal that's a non-tangible thing is to just really be in the present moment. Because here in the United States, we tend to do, and we fill our calendars full of all these things and think it's so important. And spending 2 weeks in a culture where it's just like material things are not that important. It really is about just going with the flow. They work hard, but not really hard because they enjoy what they're doing. So that's what I brought back from 2 weeks in Portugal, which I certainly could live there. I could certainly live there several months a year, telling you. Yeah, especially on the ocean. That was like super cool just to get up in the morning and walk the beaches every day. But you have basically moved, went into a tiny home on wheels, and then did a retreat just recently, all within a matter of weeks. Well, we've been apart. So I just really want to use this to talk about kind of your little story of these last several weeks of the gifts and the challenges of moving in a tiny little home on wheels, your bus, and then also about this retreat that you did, that was a grief retreat, and just share away. So I'm going to give you the floor and then I'll ask questions as they show up.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a crazy month. So at the end of September, me and my partner Danny finally got our bus, our tiny home on wheels, which is a schoolie conversion. It was being renovated all summer, so we finally got it just in time to get on the road and get down to our landing spot, which we went from Minnesota to Kentucky. And we chose this space. It was very intentional to come to this spot in Kentucky because I know someone here who has a campground. It's kind of like a glamp ground, and there's a farmhouse, and there's, I think she's got like 40 acres, and they use the land very intentionally to build community and to do regenerative agriculture. They've got chickens on the property, and they're making this really an immersive nature experience. And she's also going to be hosting retreats here too, which is exciting. And I'll talk more about my retreat that I did and why I'm excited now to bring that here. So anyway, we moved from Minnesota to Kentucky and drove the bus and another vehicle all the way down here and landed for just a few days before I flew to Montana to host a grief retreat. So I just got back from that just earlier this week, and I've just been orienting to the mountain town that we're in Kentucky here. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot of movement and travel and just newness for me. This was my first grief retreat that I did, like a full weekend retreat. I had done day retreats and workshops and things, but to put it all together was really affirming for me. Just that I love facilitating in that space. But there have been definitely a lot of challenges and a lot of newness and a lot of grief of my own just with moving and letting go of old ways of being, old versions of myself, old, towns, I mean, landscapes and neighborhoods that me and Danny grew up in Minnesota, family and friends, where it's like, I don't know when I'll see you again. And to say goodbye to all of that, to enter into this new space and open up to a completely new lifestyle in a tiny home, doing farming as a part of our lifestyle here has been just a total change of scenery and has been refreshing. So I have definitely, you're talking about, you know, the importance of slowing down and having the downtime to integrate and to land. And I was telling you, like, my nervous system and my body have been so exhausted after all of that. Like, I have just needed to rest and to sleep and to stretch and do yoga and to move my body to just allow these pieces to settle because that's been a lot.
Well, and you and I, in a human design perspective, and not a lot of people understand human design, but it is something that we utilize in our Confident Grief Coach show. We are manifesting generators. So we have a lot of energy and we always are feeling propelled to go, 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 do, create, create, create. And so for us, I think it's a bit more challenging to slow ourselves down and slow the roll and not have feelings of guilt. Like, oh, geez, I got all this on my plate. Um, and so how are you dealing with that as far as your design and wanting to get things rolling, but knowing that you need to relax?
Yeah, that's been hard. And I've needed a lot of patience and self-compassion to just allow myself the space to not do so much. I've put business on pause. I've put, life things on pause just to focus on my these personal changes in my life. So I think one thing that I intentionally left behind in the cities in Minnesota was the hustle. I decided, and especially my approach to work, and I'm a business owner and I work for the school, of course, and um, there's not, you don't clock in and clock out. It's like round the clock. Like I just found myself constantly creating and doing to my detriment, and I wasn't allowing myself that space for self-care, which I preach to my clients all the time. So that was something that I very intentionally told myself, like, that's not coming with. This is going to be a new way of approaching my work and my business, and I want this to be from an overflow of love and an overflow of energy and resources that I can give because I want to, not because I'm, empty and depleted and feel like I have to. So that's been an energetic shift for me. And I think that's been taking some navigating and some orienting to notice when those patterns and those stories come up for me again, the guilt and the shame of, I need to figure this out, or I need to be XYZ, all of the judgments that we place on our process. So I have definitely needed to just call that out. I've been journaling a lot. I have been focusing more on what I want to do and what feels good in my body as far as deciding how I want my schedule to look and feel for me while meeting my needs and while, doing all the responsibilities and while serving in my work the way that I want to show up. So I'm in the middle of that right now, and I haven't quite figured out what that looks like, but I've decided that I'm going to feel my way into that rather than like logic my way into what I
Right.
think that I should be doing.
I love that. And this just brought to mind, we are launching our app. And our app is really for grief professionals. We want to have a community, right? And you're our community leader and engagement leader for the school, and you play in the Confident Grief Coach school in so many ways. But our app is like, you've put a lot of hard work into it. We've really just like putting it together. And what you're talking about now is what I want to continue to bring, not only here, we want to serve the people who are grieving, but we need to help those of us who are supporting the grievers. And what you just landed a beautiful golden nugget in that, as we are supporters, we need to feel in to how we're supporting, because if we are constantly going by deadlines or filling our calendars because we just feel like, oh my gosh, we got to be helping these people, or I've got to make the money because I'm a small business owner, and da 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 da, we're going to actually, I think, energetically push away because we don't have the bandwidth. And so for those of you who are listening to this who are really of that helping profession, whatever that is, we focus on grief and helping those in the grief space, but finding that place of kind of a contentment. And so I just wanted, I'm throwing in a shameless plug, we are going to, we'll talk more about this in upcoming, video, but we created this app that is to support people so that you can journal. You can get some affirmations to remind yourself while you're doing this. We have support things that you can help to support your clients, but really we're focusing a lot on how do you support yourself. And I love that you brought that up. So thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a constant challenge when we're the helpers and we want to serve.
Yeah. And I think that translates into like what I was seeing in the grief retreat as well. And I think just working with grievers in general is that pattern or that tendency, especially as women in society, that gender role of caregiver to everybody else except yourself. And I think that gets especially challenged when we're in grief because it's like we don't have the bandwidth or the capacity for anything. All we can do sometimes is just exist and breathe. We can hardly eat or sleep. Like we're just, non-functional. And I saw that judgment or that pattern come through with the retreat folks over the weekend was I need to get back to life. I need to go back to work. I have all these things that I need to be doing. And it was always focused externally on all the things that we think we need to be doing rather than focusing on what's happening here now, like you said, in the present moment, like with whatever's coming up internally. And when we can tend to our internal landscape and ourselves and work to fill up our cup, then it's going to be so much easier to serve, those responsibilities that we do have in our life. But that was something that I noticed in just a few days on a grief retreat was not enough time to really help the body and the nervous system relax and deeply rest. And I think that's we have all of the ways in which our culture tries to dismiss that rest process. We are so much about go, 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 do, do, do. You have 3 days of bereavement leave, and then you have to get back to work.
Yeah.
So I think that just the grief process and the self-care process in general challenges those narratives and those patterns that our society likes to ingrain into this productivity mindset of never slowing down. And then when we do slow down, we feel the guilt and the shame, like we shouldn't be doing that, even though we absolutely need it, especially when we're grieving.
Interestingly, and I want you to then share more about the retreat and that type of thing. But I was just talking to my daughter-in-law last night. She just returned. She has a new position in a new company, and they went on their retreat as a leadership retreat and kind of their planning retreat, right, in San Diego. And so she comes back, and she didn't know any of these people. She's brand new in the company, so it was her way to connect. And one woman talked about and got up to talk about why she's been with the company for so long. And years, she could easily have retired. She actually is in she retired once, came back, right? But she was talking about her daughter's child died. And so she and her husband, as grandparents for the other child and for their daughter, really needed to have the time and the space and the bandwidth to really support. And the organization, she spoke so highly. And when Leo was telling me, I just like, my heart was just like, oh, because they gave her all the grace, allowed her the time in the timing that worked for her, and just supported her through that. And she's like, that's why I'm not going anywhere. It is not time, because I was given so much grace and time to do that. Because when you talk about the bereavement leave and that type of thing, they needed to be there not only for their own grief, but for the grief of their daughter, the grief of their grandchild, all of that. And they were given that time. And I think, like you said, in a weekend long retreat, you want to pack in as much rest, but also tools that people can walk away with. So I just would love you to just share kind of, my interest is, how did people come in? What was it like for the group that came in? Like, were they tentative? Were they, what was going on there? And then as the weekend unfolded, the things that you and helped facilitate, and then what showed up. So by the ending, what was the shift that you could see emotionally, physically, mentally in the people that came to your retreat?
Yeah, that's packed. So firstly, just to set the scene, this took place in Montana, and we rented a private cabin, like a Airbnb, right on Flathead Lake. So we had like our own dock and just overlooking this beautiful, huge lake, and there's mountains and there's trees everywhere, and it's gorgeous. The air smells good, and it's just a beautiful setting. So that I think helped create a safe container and just a resourceful spot to do this work. And we had 6 participants. There was 1 male and 5 females, and then me and another grief coach named JC, I actually did an interview with her on the show months back. So you can hear her story if you want to check that out. But yeah, I think so. People arrived on Thursday night, and we just got to know each other Thursday night and settle into the space. And people shared that they were definitely hesitant and scared and just weren't sure what to expect. A couple people shared that like on their way over they were like, oh, I wonder if this is like actually legitimate, like is this a scam, am I going to get murdered driving out into this cabin in the woods, like just because it was like we met most of these people through social media. So it was, and you know how that goes online, you never really know what to expect. So there was some of those thoughts that came up right away, but once they of course arrived and met the group, there was some relief. So that was just kind of an interesting, like I never had thought about that, but like meeting people in virtually in these spaces, coming into an like into an in-person space, I can definitely understand how that might be scary. And of course, everyone's strangers. So there was definitely, yeah, some hesitancy showing up. And then the next morning after breakfast, we started, of course, by just sharing your story, sharing your person. I had an altar space set up, so people brought pictures of their loved ones, a couple urns. I know a couple people released ashes into the water and the environment nearby. They felt like they brought their people with them, physically and energetically. So that was beautiful. We had candles and flowers, as far as honoring them. So right away there was an opening, and I think just a sense of relief being able to speak openly about their person, to be able to say their name unapologetically. Everyone cried within, that first morning, within like a half an hour, like everyone was crying because, of course, just sharing their experiences and opening up about that. So I think that helped, that vulnerability right away, and the fact that people did feel safe enough to open up immediately, felt just like that sigh of relief. Even though it's heavy, it's like we're bottling all of this in and carrying all this with, and now we've arrived at the grief retreat and it's just like coming out.
Like an
So there
exhale,
was,
right? It's the
uh-huh,
exhale.
yeah, yes, yeah, absolutely. So there was a lot of that happening, a lot of release, a lot of tears, a lot of stories, a lot of laughter, a lot of joy. And throughout the course of the retreat, of course, we had the time for resting. We had the time to go swimming in the lake. We had the time for the slow mornings. We didn't start anything until about 9:30 or 10. So people had the chance to sleep in as long as they wanted. And then we offered different workshops on, of course, talking about all of the narratives from our culture. We started with that, all of the ways in which people are encouraging us to move on or get over it, and all the ways in which society tries to skip over grief or dismiss this part of the process. So there was definitely a lot of like validation as far as like this is something that grievers from across the nation, across the world, as you know from the school, nobody does grief very well. So just I think even relating on that, just to have a sense of like camaraderie, like no, you get it, I can be real about this, and I can be honest about what's on my heart, and I can express that fully around these people. And that sense of community was established early on. Yeah. And then we did all the workshops and coping skills, and um one workshop that I did that was extremely had some great feedback from the group. And every time I do it, I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people, and that is about how grief affects the body. And we talk about the grieving brain in the grief coach school, and how your whole anatomy, your physiology, your nervous system has changes that put us into survival mode when we're in grief. So educating about that, just like, that is always a game changer when I present that to an audience, because that just allows us so much more empowerment to take care of
Mhm.
ourselves in our grief. So I paired that with some movements and meditations and breath work and all of the nervous system regulation strategies. So some feedback that I got was more of that, please, more movement, more of
Yep.
the less thinking and more just being with what is. So that was really fun to offer that. And then we did some art. We did some expression through art and colored pencils. We did some guided meditations. We did lots of discussions, lots of journaling, and just awareness of, where you're at. And then what are the next steps? We did the group coaching between me and JC, who's another coach. We had the opportunity to coach as a group, and then, to witness, as we were coaching one person, everyone else gets to see that process, which is, yeah, just really cool. And I think offers a lot of value in when other people can relate to what's going on with one person as well. So yeah, it was a lot. But by the end of it, I think people left just feeling like open-hearted, feeling a little bit lighter because they had released so much, definitely feeling tired because of all of the emotional processing that was
Mhm.
happening, but just had left with a sense of community. I think we were all, asking about each other's people by their first names, and even just to honor that memory throughout the weekend, I could tell was really special, for the people who attended, to be able just to be open about their person and their story and their grief.
Do you think
To
they'll stay
have
connected in the future? Do they have ways to stay connected with each other?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there were some strong connections that came up, which is really cool to see people that, you can bond over these experiences, and how meaningful that really is to have a friend who can sit and listen without trying to fix you, and who can just understand the depth of your pain and hold that space with you. I think that was like the number one most important thing that I was just affirmed, was the importance of community, the importance of showing up for someone without offering advice, without trying to fix it for them, but
Yep.
just to be there with them, is really what humans need at the end of the day. And it sounds so simple, yet our culture does not teach those skills, and we don't offer those opportunities to slow down and to just feel and to just express.
And hold space and hold silence, and that's what coaching is. Yes, we ask powerful questions. We help our clients because they're coming to us to create change in their lives. So there is some action in there, but it really is. We talked about in our class on Wednesday. One individual was like, that's one thing I have to learn is I think I talk too much. And it's like, and then one of the other, Cindy, who also is, she's one of our instructors, said someone witnessed her in a group setting doing the breathe coaching model where she didn't say a lot. And this woman who was helping her is like, you hardly ever talked. Cindy's going, yep, yep, because we don't. And there is so much about, I love, well, you're the movement, you're the embodied grief support coach, right? And we know that movement, physical movement, is so incredibly important for our brain and that connection, and we release things, and hormones through the movement and our breath work and all of that, which is like so critically important. But when you're in the throes of deep grief, you can't breathe, you can't even think about it. And I just think it's so powerful. So in this group, what were some of the commonalities of their grief or their type of loss? Were there some commonalities there that kind of showed up for this group?
We had a broad spectrum. We had a couple grieving moms. One who died by a drugged driver. The daughter was hit head on by someone who was driving on meth. And so there was a mother and then her daughter, so the other sibling of this daughter who died, they were there, and it was really cool to see their mother-daughter dynamic and how they showed up for each other and themselves in their grief. So that was interesting to watch. We also had another grieving mom there whose son died by suicide. We had a young woman there whose fiance died by suicide. So we had a couple, commonalities as far as how people had died. Um,
Tragic, traumatic, tragic. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we had, let's see, another a widow. So his wife had died. She actually had ALS, which is how my dad died.
Oh, wow.
So that was a powerful connection. Um, the other grief coach, her mom died. So we had a couple just parent loss experiences. And then who else was there? We had someone who actually came to support her friend whose son died by suicide. She invited her friend to come with, so she had some emotional support. But then this woman had some of her own grief that was coming up unexpectedly from, other areas of life, even though she wasn't actively there for someone that had passed that she's needing support with. She was mainly there for her friend, but had of course her own process that came through as well. So we had a bit of a spectrum, and of course there was one guy and five women. So that was interesting to hear from him, and that he felt comfortable sharing around a group of women, and to get different times of people's lives, different age groups, from different states across the country too. So it was really cool to see just how dramatically different people can be. Yet here we are, and everyone just became friends like so quickly.
Yeah. Just because of that, we're community.
Yeah.
We're all part of this human race. We're all here to, we are people, groups are necessary, right, for human beings. We are pack, pack people, right? We come together, and being alone is so difficult because you really do need that sense of community, which is, I know that what we're working for, and definitely what you're working for, is just really creating this space of community. And gosh, I just love hearing all about it. And what I find is interesting is some people will go, oh, I want to go to a grief group where people have a like loss like mine. That may not necessarily be what you're really looking for. Sometimes when you have that broad spectrum, like what you just had, actually is maybe a bit more supportive for you in your grief than having someone who's got the exact same type of loss, because we do comparison grief at times, like, oh my gosh, you know, your child died with addiction or fentanyl poisoning or whatever the case may be, or oh my gosh, your person died by suicide. That is so much worse
Mhm.
than watching, my loved one die with, a longstanding illness. Or, for me, I still tend to do that comparison, like, well, my mom was 96 and a half, right? Because she's my brother. They're my most recent losses. And so I comparison, like, well, that's, she lived a full life and blah, blah, blah. And then I have to remind myself, but I had more years with her. So my grief is cemented in my brain very differently.
Mhm.
I miss her differently because she was such a constant in my life for 60 plus years. And so, but there's no comparison. There is absolutely no comparison whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that is really cool. I'm going to talk about this next week, but I wanted to share. I'm going to see if I can find this. I am doing a celebration of life for an individual who died by suicide. And so I met with his family. Well, I met with his wife and her siblings. Talk about a support. We talk about having the tribe. Her sisters all just like came together, and it's like this coven of love. And they're taking and helping plan, do all that, because this poor woman is just in absolute shock. But they're coming in and doing this. And one of the sisters sent me a message yesterday, and she said, my husband died when I was 33. And my sisters, they all came in and did the same thing. And she said, this is a very special group of women. And I thought, wow, to have that, it's having that tribe. But I wanted to share, if I can just find it real quick. I reached out to both of the boys because didn't get to meet them. And I just asked, do you have any stories or anything like that? And this is what just was very powerful. He said, sorry if I can't list as many things as usual, or I can't say a specific story. My memory is a little foggy for some reason. 18-year-old. And I just said to him, there's a real reason behind your brain feeling foggy. It has to do with the science of grief and its effect on the brain. So know that what you're feeling is super normal. And he's just like, send back, thank you.
Mm.
Because he's like, I don't know why my brain isn't working.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think and so as you're talking, I'm thinking, I'm connecting with an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old in a very different way than mom. And I'm just thinking retreats, you and I've talked about that, to be able to provide like a retreat for people that are, emerging adults, or, teenagers and emerging adults, so powerful, because oftentimes they don't have other people that have experienced what they've experienced. And so they feel kind of like they're out there.
Mhm.
I remember my cousin Barb, who and her parents died. She was still fairly young, in her 20s, and no one in her group had ever experienced parental loss. She was the only one. And so it was like she didn't feel like she could really even, that anybody understood her deep pain of being
Yeah.
an orphan, in her 20s type
Yeah.
thing. So yeah. So anyway, I just was throwing that in, that there's just so much beauty in these retreats. And you and I have talked about that. It's so amazing how things happen. So you're now living in a place that, potential for retreat in the mountain. I have another person that she's been building a retreat center in Maine, I think it is, for the last 3 years. So we're now having, because there's a group of us that have helped kind of with this vision, and she now has it ready. So we're going to meet next week to talk about what's that going to look like. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Cami, I mean, we're going to be able to do some fun things, in terms of being able to provide space and time and healing in, maybe a long weekend type venue for people in person, in addition to what we do every day with our one-on-one coaching and with our school and that type of thing. So it's a pretty,
I just I think that's so valuable. Just like it just got me so excited about retreats because there's the community aspect, which, we talked about is like so important when you feel alone in your grief, to have people who get it. That, and to do that in person, I think is at a beautiful retreat spot where you can, you don't have to cook, you don't have to clean, you just arrive
right.
and you have services that are available to you. And then you get the educational piece, like you mentioned, even just sharing that with your that 18-year-old client, to offer some validation, and with, the nervous system, and how grief affects the body, learning about those kinds of things, how that can empower your journey. And then of course the tools and the skills and the coping strategies, and then the coaching, and just all of those things together in a space, in this beautiful location, surrounded by people who get it. Like, I just like, that's life changing. Like this weekend, this woman shared, the mom and her daughter, they were like, this was life changing. And just to have that safe space for the expression, like they left feeling so full. And that's just like, wow, like to be able to offer that in just a few short days just warms my heart. And yes, I'm excited to do more of this. So keep a lookout if anyone wants to come to a retreat. I'm sure there will be more from me and Pat.
Oh, there will be, definitely. I mean, that's on the horizon. So yeah, just so beautiful. And you bring so much to the table for these people. And yeah, when you talk about life changing, and I know even like grief camps, you and I both volunteered at grief camps, and over the weekend, the change that we see in people.
Yeah.
And it's just that they can get into a space where they don't have to take care of everything else. They can just be for themselves and find community, find a tribe, find the people that they feel that they can be real with and say exactly what's on their mind, because people hold back in day-to-day life because they think, oh, people think I talk about my loved one too much, or they think maybe I should move on, or why am I still talking about this 2 years later, from the time that my loved one died. Why am I being this way? Why am I not healthy? Why am I, you just don't feel like that they can really speak fully oftentimes in real life, where teaching people tools and having resources and creating a community for them is like the best thing that any of us can do.
Yeah, and you don't have to hold that in, even if it's for a couple days where you can just let it all out and drop things that you don't want to be carrying anymore and to just rest. Like that is coming back to that full circle of like, then how do we operate in a world where it's always constantly go, go, go? You always have something to do. And I think finding these ways to find a weekend to just, go lay in the sun, on a dock by the water and just go take a dunk. It doesn't have to be a huge grief retreat. It could just be, today I need a few deep breaths at the before I jump between meetings or something like that,
Yeah,
where we find more ways to nourish ourselves and to tend to our grief and to hold space for ourselves and in community with other people. It's like we need so much more of that. And little doses or retreat doses, it's all good.
it's great. It's great. And I know that some people might be saying, well, that's all great and good, but I can't afford to go on a retreat. And, sometimes people are like, well, with coaching, I can't do that. And it's really about lean into the people then that might be able to support you in that financially, you know, lean into the people and the tribe around you. Think about kind of thinking out of the box. And that's what we can do as coaches, is help people think a little bit like, how might you be able to come up with this, because you deserve investing in yourself right now, and the investment in yourself right now will pay dividends for the rest of your life. And but I hear that a lot, like even with grief coaching and that type of thing, and it's like, if there's a will, there's a way. And you and I can really sit down and brainstorm with people, like, how are some of the ways that maybe you can come up with the financial pieces to be able to attend a retreat, because it's not going to break the bank. But yeah, you might not be able to afford it, but I bet there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to provide you $50, $100, whatever, to help get you to that retreat because they love you so much.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, this has been wonderful. It's so good to get back. I mean, Cami and I are full bore. Now in our next, we have cohort 15 that's on our Wednesday nights, and cohort 16 of the Confident Grief Coach certification program start tomorrow. We're just starting, so we go for 12 weeks. Wednesday was beautiful. We have just a couple of people in the class, but I believe the universe created that for a reason. And then we have more starting tomorrow. And it just like does my heart good, because there's so many people like you and myself and all the graduates that really want to go out there and make a difference in the world. And it may be through retreats, it may be through one-on-one coaching, it may be through group coaching, which was part of your retreat, right? All these different things that we're really excited, because we really are committed to helping people find accessible and transformative healing for grieving families throughout the world, right? That's what we're all
That's what
about.
we're here for. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And any last words of wisdom before we sign off for today's show?
I think don't forget to breathe. I think no matter where we're at, that's like it doesn't have to be so like self-care sometimes doesn't have to be take a full retreat or go to the spa or whatever it can be. Let's take a moment and breathe. And I think remembering that we have so many resources within us right here and right now that you don't have to go spend a lot of money to get them. Like you really are enough. No matter where you're at, if you're in grief or if you're a provider, you're, someone completely unrelated to the grief space right now tuning into this, like, then like you are enough and you have enough, and returning back to that, finding those inner resources, and especially through the breath is like the best way, at least for me, to tap into that. So just a reminder to take a big, deep breath before you transition into whatever else you've got going on with your day.
Yep. And that deep breath means you need to exhale. It's
Yeah.
not just taking it in. It's like, because that's what will bring the blood pressure down, your pulse rate down, the anxiety down, and get you back into your body in a way that is healing and nurturing and physiologically supporting you. So
Yeah.
all
Mhm.
right. Well, I know that I'll see you tomorrow, but we'll be back on next week, and enjoy the show. And for those of you who are listening, it always helps if you like our show and subscribe to it, just because then we're able to get it out greater ways and possibilities into people, the more that you do that. So as you're on YouTube right now, just hit that like button if you liked it, and the subscribe button. And we're gonna have more interviews with other people and that type of thing as we're going forward. So just know that we keep expanding. And if there's a topic that you would like us to talk about, put it in the comments, because we're more than happy to explore that on the show. Talk to you
Thanks,
later.
Pat. See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.